In the heart of a bustling city park, where the morning sun filtered through the leaves like shards of forgotten dreams, an old man stirred on his weathered bench. His name was John Harlan, a forgotten hero of wars long past, who had called this cold slab of wood his home for 2 decades. But on this ordinary autumn day, as joggers rushed by and children laughed in the distance, a stranger in a crisp suit approached him with purpose. The man extended a plain white envelope, his eyes locking onto John's with an intensity that cut through the veteran's haze of despair. "This is for you," the stranger said softly, before turning and vanishing into the crowd. John's trembling hands clutched the envelope, his heart pounding. What could possibly be inside that might shatter the walls of his endless night? And just as he began to tear it open, a gust of wind whipped through the park, scattering leaves like omens, leaving us all wondering, would this be the end of his suffering, or the beginning of something even more heartbreaking? John Harlan hadn't always been this way. Born in a small Midwestern town in 1945, he grew up under the shadow of his father's stories from World War II, tales of bravery and sacrifice that ignited a fire in young John's soul. He enlisted in the army at 18, shipping off to Vietnam where the jungles swallowed men whole. There, amid the chaos of gunfire and the screams of the wounded, John became a medic, pulling his comrades from the brink of death with steady hands and an unbreakable spirit. He saved lives, dozens, maybe more, but the war took pieces of him in return. Nightmares of exploding mortar shells and the faces of friends who didn't make it home haunted him long after the helicopters carried him back to American soil in 1972. Discharged with honors, a Purple Heart pinned to his chest, John returned to a country that didn't know how to welcome its broken warriors. Jobs were scarce for a man whose hands shook at loud noises, whose sleep was fractured by invisible enemies. His wife, Sarah, tried to hold their marriage together, but the distance grew. One night, after a particularly brutal flashback, he lashed out in fear, and she left with their young daughter, Emily, vowing never to return. That was the first crack in his world, the one that sent him spiraling into the bottle, then the streets. For years, John wandered from shelter to shelter, but the crowds and the noise triggered his PTSD too fiercely. He found solace in the park, a quiet corner bench under an old oak tree that reminded him of the farm back home. 20 years blurred into a monotonous rhythm, scavenging for food in dumpsters behind restaurants, begging for change from passers-by who averted their eyes, enduring the biting winters wrapped in newspapers and donated blankets. His once strong body weakened, arthritis claimed his joints, and a persistent cough hinted at something deeper, perhaps the residue of Agent Orange exposure that the VA had dismissed in endless paperwork battles. But John wasn't entirely alone. There was Maria, the kind-hearted food truck owner who slipped him hot coffee and sandwiches every morning, her warm smile a rare beacon in his gray existence. "You're a fighter, Mr. Harlan," she'd say, her accent thick from her Mexican roots. "Don't you forget that." And then there was Tommy, a fellow veteran 10 years his junior, who slept on a nearby bench and shared stories of Desert Storm over shared cigarettes. Tommy's optimism clashed with John's cynicism, but their bond was real. Two lost souls clinging to each other in the urban wilderness. As the days turned into weeks, John's mind often drifted to Emily. She would be in her 40s now, perhaps with children of her own. He wondered if she remembered him, the father who taught her to ride a bike before the war stole his gentleness. Regret was his constant companion, heavier than any rucksack he'd carried in the jungle. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled like artillery fire, John huddled under a tarp, whispering apologies to the ghosts of his past. Little did he know, fate was weaving threads he couldn't see. The envelope, now tucked safely in his coat pocket, burned like a secret he wasn't ready to face. But curiosity gnawed at him. That night, as the storm raged, he finally slid his finger under the seal, pulling out a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was elegant, unfamiliar. "Dear Mr. Harlan," it began. "You don't know me, but I know you. 20 years ago, you saved my father's life in Vietnam. He never forgot. And now, It's time to repay that debt. John's breath caught. What debt? What repayment? His eyes scanned further, but the ink blurred in the rain, leaving him in agonizing suspense. Was this a cruel joke, or the miracle he'd stopped believing in? The letter continued, revealing the stranger's identity. Alexander Reed, son of Corporal Elias Reed, whom John had dragged from a burning village under heavy fire, patching his wounds with makeshift bandages until evac arrived. Elias had survived, built a life, and amassed a modest fortune in real estate before passing away 6 months prior. In his will, he'd left instructions for his son to find John and deliver not just words, but a key to a small house on the outskirts of the city, fully paid for, along with a trust fund of $200,000 to cover medical care and living expenses. My father always said you were the reason he got to see me grow up, the letter read. Now, let us give you a chance to rebuild what was taken. Tears streamed down John's face as he read, mixing with the rain. But doubt crept in. Was this real? Scams preyed on the vulnerable, and John had been burned before. He folded the letter away, his heart a battlefield of hope and fear. The next morning, he sought out Maria at her truck. "What do you think?" he asked, showing her the envelope. Her eyes widened. "John, this could be your ticket out. But be careful, go to the address, see for yourself." With Tommy by his side for moral support, John boarded a bus for the first time in years, heading to the suburbs. The house was real. A cozy bungalow with a porch swing and a garden overgrown but full of potential. As he turned the key, the door creaked open to reveal dusty furniture and a photo on the mantel, Elias Reed, smiling with his family. Overwhelmed, John sank to the floor, sobbing. But just as peace began to settle, a knock echoed at the door. Who could it be, and what hidden strings might be attached to this gift? It was Alexander Reed himself, the stranger from the park, standing there with a gentle smile and a folder of documents. "I wanted to make sure you found it," he said, stepping inside. Over coffee at the kitchen table, Alexander shared stories of his father, how Elias had searched for John for years, hiring private investigators, but John's nomadic life had made him a ghost. Only recently, through a chance sighting by a mutual veteran acquaintance, had they located him. The trust fund was legitimate, verified by lawyers, and included provisions for therapy to address John's PTSD. "Dad wanted you to have a fresh start," Alexander explained. "No obligations, just gratitude." For John, it was surreal. He toured the house, imagining mornings without the cold, evenings with a warm bed. But the transition wasn't easy. That first night, alone in the silence, flashbacks assaulted him, the explosions, the screams. He paced the floors until dawn, questioning if he deserved this. Challenges mounted, navigating bureaucracy for his VA benefits, learning to shop for groceries without the shame of begging, even simple things like using a washing machine after years of hand-washing in park fountains. Maria visited often, bringing homemade tamales and encouragement. "You're not alone in this, John," she'd say, her own story of immigrating alone at 20 mirroring his isolation. Tommy moved in temporarily, helping with chores and sharing laughs that eased the tension. Together, they attended a veteran support group, where John met others like him, men and women scarred by service, rebuilding one day at a time. As weeks turned to months, John's health improved. With the trust fund, he saw a doctor who diagnosed his cough as treatable pneumonia and prescribed medication for his arthritis. Therapy sessions peeled back layers of trauma. He learned breathing techniques to combat nightmares, journaling to process regrets. But the deepest wound was Emily. Alexander, sensing John's unspoken pain, offered to help find her. Using the investigators who'd located John, they traced her to a nearby state, where she lived as a schoolteacher with 2 kids. John wrote a letter, halting, honest, apologizing for the past, explaining the war's toll. Days stretched into agony as he waited for a reply. When the phone finally rang, it was her voice, tentative but warm. "Dad? Is it really you?" They talked for hours, tears on both ends. Emily had wondered about him all those years, her mother passing away a decade ago without reconciliation. "I forgive you," she said. "Let's start over." Their reunion was emotional, a drive to her home, hugs that bridged decades, grandchildren climbing into his lap with innocent curiosity. John shared war stories softened by time, Emily recounting her life. It wasn't perfect, trust took time, but healing began. Yet, even in this newfound stability, life threw curveballs. One evening, as John gardened, planting tomatoes like his father had taught him, a letter arrived from the VA, denying a back claim for benefits he'd filed years ago. Frustration boiled over, he felt the old anger rising, the sense of abandonment by the system he'd served. Tommy, now sober and job-hunting thanks to John's influence, talked him down. "We've come too far, brother. Fight it smart." With Alexander's help, they appealed, gathering evidence from John's service records. The resolution came months later, approval, with retroactive payments that bolstered his security. Another challenge arose when Maria's food truck faced closure due to rising rents. John, drawing on his medic's resourcefulness, rallied the community, veterans from the group, Emily's school friends, to crowdfund and relocate her business. "You fed me when no one else would," he told her. "Now, let me return the favor." Their friendship deepened, hinting at something more, a late-blooming romance born from shared resilience. Through it all, John reflected on his journey. The park bench had been his prison, but also his teacher, humbling him, showing him humanity's edges. He volunteered at shelters, sharing his story to inspire others. "Rock bottom isn't the end," he'd say. "It's where you find the strength to climb." Alexander became a friend, their families blending in barbecues and holidays. Tommy landed a job at a hardware store, crediting John's example. Emily's kids called him Grandpa John, filling his home with laughter that drowned out the echoes of war. One crisp spring day, a year after the envelope changed everything, John sat on his porch, watching the sunset. The world felt possible again, not perfect, but his. He'd faced the abyss and emerged, proving that kindness, like a stranger's gift, could ripple outward, mending what was broken. And in that quiet moment, he whispered thanks to Elias, to the universe, for second chances. If this story touched your heart, remember, hope can find us in the unlikeliest places. Hit that like button if it moved you, and subscribe for more inspiring tales that remind us of the power of perseverance and human connection. Thanks for watching.